This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 58, entitled Promoting the Fluffy Graveyard. Description. This flyer aims to promote the concept of the fluffy graveyard, that is, the lifestyle that awaits 40% of women over 40, that is, living alone, punished in many cases by men for not bothering to become FIP and abusing men financially. Flyer itself. Promoting the fluffy graveyard. I think I heard on one of Thinking Apes videos that now about half of adults in the US live alone. From that I was able to calculate the proportion of women over 40 who live alone, and it came out at about 40%. Have a look at the calculation at the bottom of this flyer for details. I was surprised at how high this 40% figure is, and its significance gradually penetrated my consciousness, which is what this flyer is concerned with. If about 40% of women live alone, then that's nearly half of the female population of that age bracket. I assume a fair proportion of that 40% are women who have been divorced and are no longer capable of attracting a man to have another relationship. Since women are social creatures, living alone is probably tougher on them than it is for men, who tend to be more easily preoccupied by things and ideas than women. The masculist in me started thinking about the consequences for men's lib of this 40% statistic. I think it's highly significant, but hardly anyone talks about it, so I dreamt up a label for it and now wish to promote it, that is, the label and the concept, because it impacts significantly on the MGTOW/masculist movements. I call the fact that about 40% of women over 40 live alone the fluffy graveyard. That is, it's where older women go to die, not literally, but figuratively. That is, living a rather joyless, bitter, lonely, sexless, sour half-life. Women over 40 are far less sexually attractive to men, for obvious Darwinian reasons, namely that men hugely prefer to penis nubile women who are capable of having babies. Evolution promotes this obvious strategy. Older women, especially those 50 and over, are post-menopausal and therefore cannot have babies, so men tend to ignore them as potential sexual partners. So it's in women's self-interest, if they want to have a life partner, that is, someone to share their life with, someone who gives them companionship, then women, especially younger women, need to think a lot more about the fluffy graveyard. Young Western women today are arrogant. They have absorbed the third-wave feminist message that they can do whatever they want. They are at the peak of their sexual attractiveness and know that men drool over them and strongly want to put their penises in them. These young women know that during their 20s, using the contraceptive pill, they can have sex as readily and as easily as men do and not get pregnant, but they need to be careful of STDs, that's sexually transmitted diseases. That problem has not gone away. In fact, I read that 1 in 4 co-eds in America, women, have an STD, 1 in 4. Back to the flyer. They know that if they get bored with their man-slave husband, they can divorce him and have him continue to be a manslave, thanks to the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts. They know that they could get custody of the kids, get his house to live in, and force him to pay child support and alimony if she's a fluffy. It's therefore not surprising that these young women have become arrogant. They can afford to be lazy. They don't have to make a real effort to become a FIP major, to have a FIP major education. They don't have to be FIPs, because there are all these men drooling over her vagina who are willing to pay her money to get access to it. She can afford to revel in her prostitute fluffy status. What these young fluffies are barely aware of is what awaits them in the fluffy graveyard. Half of them will get divorced. With children, they will then be far less attractive to men as potential dating partners. So as they get beyond 40, they will have a harder and harder time attracting men. They will become increasingly invisible to men, who prefer devoting their attention to the nubile females. A lot of these divorced women are feminists, who use their feminist dogma to rationalize their loneliness. They blame men for not taking an interest in them, rather than putting some of the blame on themselves and their behavior towards men when they were younger. They become sexless and bitter that few men want them. The older they get, the more difficult it becomes. Millions of older women live alone, with no male partner, coming home from work each evening to an emptied apartment with no one to chat with and no one to penis them to give them orgasms. They compare their older lives with their younger lives and notice the lack of male attention, the lack of readily available penises. As they get into their 50s and beyond, the supply of penises almost dries up. So since 99.5% of women are heterosexual, they need men to sexually satisfy them, but they don't get it. So they suffer. They lead bitter, angry, lonely lives, and society neglects them. They are almost invisible. Personally, I have not seen many documentaries on this problem. There are millions of women over 40 who live alone and who are not happy, yet almost no one talks about this subject. But masculists can use this reality to their advantage. They can package this phenomenon and give it a label, as I'm trying to do. The label I chose was the Fluffie graveyard. That is, the lifestyle of fluffies who abused men when they were younger, and now men are getting their revenge on her later in her life. Note, the MGTOW term, the wall, refers to when women lose their sexual attractiveness. It does not refer to the lifestyle that 40% of women lead after 40. Masculists/MGTOWs need to push the concept of the fluffy graveyard much more onto young women, warning them that if they are not a lot nicer to men when they are young, then they will be divorced. And if they have a fluffy divorce that is financially massacring their ex-husband, then other men will avoid her like the plague. These potential male dating partners will reason they don't want to be the next victim of a fluffy bitch. They will let her continue to rot on the shelf. Masculists/MGTOWs need to push the fluffy graveyard idea to young women, to scare them that if they are not FIPS and if they divorce as a fluffy, they will probably be doomed to live out the rest of their lives in the fluffy graveyard. Manless, loveless, sexless, lonely and bitter. All young women need to be taught about the fluffy graveyard so that they are conscious that that is their fate if they abuse men when they are young, in their 20s and 30s. Women who are FIPS will be much more likely to get a man in their 40s and above. Older men will at least tway-tweff with them, rather than ignore them totally. Men know that a FIP woman will be far less likely to try to parasite on their money, because FIP women have their own money. They are financially independent by definition. Hopefully, the concept of the fluffy graveyard will become more widespread. So imagine the following conversation between a man and a woman in their 20s, 30s. M for man. You really abuse men. You take their money, you give nothing back. You expect them to pay for you, give you a house, and you have not bothered to get a FIP major education. You're a real fluffy. I suppose you're aware of your fate as a fluffy. You will end up in the fluffy graveyard. You need to be nicer to men, or you'll have a miserable, lonely second half-life. Men will get their revenge on you. F. That's female.
My mother gave me a serious talk about this last week. She lives in the fluffy graveyard, she told me. She strongly tried to warn me, don't end up like me. Be a FIP, be nice to men, or you will die a slow, lonely death in the fluffy graveyard. She scared me, so I've been looking it up on Google. It's hard to imagine, because now I have all the men I want. They pay for me, give me stuff, are nice to me, flatter me. It's very nice. My mother, on the other hand, is bitter and lonely. She is not happy. She told me she started reading about MGTOW and masculism, and she said it changed the way she looks at men, and how she treated them when she was young. She said, I'm falling into the same trap as she did, and that I should learn from her mistake and not repeat it.
So, I'm recommending that MGTOW/Masculist push the concept of the fluffy graveyard to the women they come across, to the media, and onto society in general. Make the label popular so that it becomes a meme and spreads, making people aware of the concept so that it frightens young women, motivating them to become FIPS and not to be arrogant with men. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name De Garis, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers. Ciao.